Hello, I'm Dana Levenberg, member of Assembly for the 95th District of New York State. Welcome to my podcast series, Building Healthy Communities. My mission as a legislator is to build healthy communities in every sense of the word: environmentally healthy, economically healthy, physically and mentally healthy, all through the lens of equity. In this podcast series, I'll be talking with the leaders, advocates, and others who are helping to build healthy communities here in AD 95 and beyond. Along the way, we'll share information and resources for local residents, news that you can use. I know there has been much discussion over the past couple of years regarding policing in our communities, especially in regard to mental health. Many wish to take a new look at police responses to mental health crises to ensure the safety of those in need of help. Today, I have Kevin Sylvester with me to discuss the Ossining Police Department solution to this issue. Kevin is Ossining's outgoing chief of police extraordinaire and has been a longtime advocate for policing with a conscious focus on mental health. So, thank you so much to him, to you, Chief, as well as the mobile crisis response team that was established in the Ossining Police Department and through the county. And welcome. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this very important subject.
Thanks. It's one of my favorites, and I'm glad to be here and share all of the good stuff going on.
Fantastic. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what the mobile crisis response team actually is and does?
Sure. It's about my favorite thing in policing. Mobile Crisis Response Team is a group of people employed by Family Services of Westchester and contracted by Westchester County to provide support services in police departments and communities around Westchester County. So our team is comprised of a number of people. Right now, we operate from 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, with on-call folks at night and on the weekends. And they are mental health professionals, clinicians, but also peer support folks that are tasked with both co-responding with police officers, doing some follow-up work, and really providing that 360 wraparound service that police departments have really, in good conscience, tried to provide, but were never really well suited to do.
Great. And so how's it going?
Fantastic. This is really it's one of the things I'm most excited about in law enforcement, and really one of my most proud, not necessarily my contribution, but things that I've participated in over the years. Really, any change is hard in law enforcement, change is hard in government. Nobody likes to see new things necessarily. Sometimes people feel threatened if it encroaches on their territory. But the mobile crisis team really has been the magic that everybody's been looking for. When this was rolled out by Westchester County, it was presented to a number of police departments, and the objective was that they would be co-responding, direct partners with police departments. Anything great takes a little bit of risk taking, and for me, this was a good risk. We invited them into our building. We're part of a catchment area that encompasses Ossining, Sleepy Hollow, Mount Pleasant, Pleasantville, and Briarcliff. And what I knew is that if you have outsiders coming into a police department and want them to feel welcome, we've got to get them fully embedded. So they are in our building, those 5 days a week. When they're here on the weekends, they're here as well. Eventually, they'll be 24/7, 365. And it is such a fantastic resource for cops on a call who aren't sure where to turn next, or people that are looking for help, and a cop isn't necessarily what they need.
Absolutely. So, and what can you say actually inspired the implementation or the development of this program? How do we get here?
This has been talked about for years. We've always been looking for what the magic bullet's going to be that's going to solve those calls that aren't necessarily for a cop, but we're the only ones here sometimes. So it had been discussed for a very, very long time and what that would look like. But the reality is that the police reform movement really lit a fire under this initiative. Westchester County went out and courageously found the funding to make this happen, because ultimately that's really what it comes down to. It would be impossible for all 47 different jurisdictions in Westchester County to find their own mobile crisis team, employ all those people, support their benefits. For right now, catchment areas are working where we're sharing with a number of other jurisdictions. I think the next evolution is that hopefully county funded still, or with some support from the state, perhaps, that every jurisdiction has their own fully embedded team. It's a monster undertaking, and I think everybody has to be patient and really work out the kinks of how this is going right now. But that's what's really been great about this. What I love is that we are actually taking constructive effort and making tangible improvements in the way we police our communities.
It's amazing. It really is. And I mean, I've had the chance actually to tour it and to meet some of the folks who are involved. What kind of training do they actually get to be considered part of the mobile crisis unit?
So for the team members themselves, their levels of training vary. Some of them are clinicians; they're licensed clinical social workers or people with advanced degrees that are in the profession. Others are peer support, people with life experience that puts them in similarly situated circumstances as folks that we may interact with on a day-to-day basis. So some of them may be domestic violence survivors. Some of them may have experienced substance use disorders. Some of them have had housing insecurity issues. So in terms of their training, though, everybody that's a part of this team has gone through in-depth training with Family Services of Westchester in order to deal with things like de-escalation, which is sort of, part and parcel to the job that they do, as well as, all of the persons with disability and dealing with people in crisis. And then a large part of their training really is helping them to understand when they've identified a problem or connected with the person is where do we go from there? Because the crisis team isn't necessarily what I call them magicians. I ask them what magic they've performed today. And the reality is that it's not necessarily their words on scene that are what's really changing the game. It's that they're a conduit to connect people with resources in the community. So if you're suffering from food insecurity, they're going to help to make sure that you're connected with someone that's going to put groceries in your refrigerator. If you're suffering from housing insecurity, they're going to get you into a shelter and help you to find work and all of those kind of things. They're not necessarily holding your hand from start to finish. In certain cases they are, but in most cases they are the avenue for you to find the resources that you need that you may not have otherwise been able to locate.
And how about your team? How is your team trained to work with the mobile crisis unit?
So just in terms of generalized policing, that's changed a lot over the last, couple of decades in the sense that every cop coming out of the academy has been through de-escalation training. Our department's done implicit bias training. Everybody focuses on persons with disabilities. So you understand things like folks dealing with autism or dementia or all the other things that aren't necessarily just your garden variety, what people would ordinarily think of as mental illness, but things that are emotional that could attach and really make a challenging situation if you don't know what you're looking at. In terms of our training with the team, the first thing we did after actually getting them an office inside of our building is to start inviting them to every briefing. So when the cops are given instructions every 8 hours around the clock, there's a crisis team sitting in that briefing. So when the cops hear what the objectives are, what the concerns are, what's going on, the crisis team is there. When we talk about people that are getting themselves into trouble or people who have been in trouble or calls that we're receiving over and over again, the crisis team is listening to that and they're interacting in every single briefing every 8 hours. And then beyond that, what we've seen over time is as cops build trust and the team builds trust, the cops are in that office all day long talking about the call they went on, what they saw. In certain instances, the team will go with them on the call. In other instances, cops will come back and say, look, this wasn't a call we thought we'd need you on, and it might still not be a call we need you on, but I want to tell you about it because you might want to check in with this person because they might need some resources, and I think you could be of assistance. So in terms of formal training, there's lots of things that we can tell people to do, but the real work is in building the relationships and the information sharing so that we have, a fully functional team that all operates with unity.
Fantastic. Really, it's just so amazing. And it sounds like, because just from your description, that your police force has actually really embraced them, and if they're counting on them now, if they're going and talking to them, that's exactly what you want, right? Like you want them to kind of have that back and forth, have that rapport, be able to get advice, maybe even themselves. I mean, does that ever happen where the mobile crisis unit maybe gives your cops some ideas of how to handle a situation if they're not even there, or maybe there's lots of situations that are similar.
They're amazing. First and foremost, I think that the team that's been placed here really was well suited for this department in particular, and I don't think we could have handpicked it any better. I certainly didn't know these folks when they got here. It just so happened that David, Nicole, and Armand and our team that's here all day long, they're really great people, and they've really meshed well with the staff. In terms of things that they offer here and the way it goes, I said to them when they first got here, cops are suspicious by nature, and they're not going to talk to you for a couple of days until they find out you're actually going to be here for a while. And I pointed out the cops that I thought would be most skeptical. And in a sense, that's good, because those cops that are skeptical are there holding them accountable, making sure that they're really providing some kind of service and not just giving them a free pass. But I also said those that are most skeptical will become their biggest customers. They will be the ones that will bring the most work to them, because those are the people that are most thoughtful about it. So, a handful of officers that really, really questioned the program up front, saw what was going on, and really dug in on how they could not necessarily use the crisis team, but how the community can use the crisis team and how
Sure.
they could be the one feeding things. But it really, in terms of when I say 360, I mean, these folks are involved in everything that is Ossining, because we've had critical incidents where I'm concerned about the police officers coming back from where they've seen some uncomfortable situations or horrible scene or dealt with death or things like that. And the crisis team is right there to
Mm.
try and help us until we can get to a more formal debrief and talk to cops and say, are you okay? And that is like a major theme with our department, is that we ask each other on a regular basis, are you okay? And if you're not, we need to know, and we need to know how we can help you and support you to make sure that you are, because this is challenging work, and we want good people going out and doing good things. So, in terms of how they're working together, I sit with the team almost every day. I review all of our reports, and I like to talk to them about what's going on to make sure that the information is getting to them. I also talk to our supervisors to make sure they're hearing back from the crisis team. And my job's just to sort of orchestrate the symphony, but it's so nice to walk in and know that the work's all done and I'm just there to make sure that it happens. There's not a lot for me to do other than to watch good stuff happening, and it's really a pleasure to see it.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear it. Can you talk a little bit about, I know that you said this is Westchester wide, which obviously I'm familiar with as well. But what other communities have an embedded mobile crisis unit at this point? How's that going? How's the rollout going? I know that they had some little hiccups, I guess you could say, at the beginning.
Yeah, look, the job market's challenging right now, and I think that weighs on this more than necessarily a county plan or what the industry is. It's been difficult for anybody to hire in a job that's 24/7, 365. Quite frankly, cops don't really love working midnights any more than anybody else do. So finding mental health professionals that want to work midnights and weekends, equally hard. Right now, Westchester County is blanketed. The county has afforded contracts that cover the entire area. They are divided into catchment areas. So Peekskill has a team, Ossining has a team, Mount Kisco has a team, White Plains, Yonkers, Port Chester, and I believe those are the centralized locations. And then each of those headquartered areas covers a catchment area of multiple jurisdictions, with the exceptions of, like, Yonkers is very large. They have their own.
Sure.
I believe Mount Vernon has their own. So the cities typically have their own, and then towns and villages are sort of sharing based on geography. Uh, that works. They are divided by different. There are a few different vendors that are providing services. Ours is Family Services of Westchester. Others have others. I know that there have been a couple of bumps in the road in terms of finding enough staffing, and some companies may or may not have changed. I'm not really sure about other jurisdictions. We love Family Services of Westchester
Yeah.
because of the team that's
Right.
here.
Right.
I can't speak to what else they do, but if the rest of their company is run the way our team here is, it's a really fantastic organization. The real challenge for this going forward to get to that 100% A plus level we're really looking for is that ultimately really twofold. One, we need this to become 24/7, 365 fully staffed.
Sure.
And that's hard, both because you've got to find people that want to work overnight, and not
Right.
everybody wants to do that, but also the reality of towns and villages policing is that we have overnight shifts that are very busy, and then we have overnight shifts where you may tap the radio to make sure it's still on. And
Right.
funding a program like that supports that is, it's a bit of a bet, it's an investment, it's taking a chance. So for right now, they've got to find the people willing to do it. They also have to be really great people, because this is not a place
Hmm.
where you can hire just any person to come in and be on the crisis team. It has to be somebody who truly loves what they do,
Hmm.
and really is well suited to do the work. So they're well on their way to that. And every new person we've added, I've found fascinating and think they're a great fit.
Hmm.
But we're working towards that. And then eventually, like I said, I would love to see this funded to the extent that they are fully embedded in every single police department. I think one of the things that we need to see countywide is my colleagues at the executive levels generally are very, very supportive of this.
Mm.
I can't speak to every officer that works in every department. My hope is that people in other departments are embracing this the same way we are. I know my perspective is that if the team is not in the building, sitting with the cops, eating lunch with them every single day, the relationship can't be built. And I know in some places they don't have space for them, so they're in other buildings. And I don't know what those relationships are like, but I hope everybody's got as good of a relationship as we do.
Well, I mean, you were saying, like, for example, that the team that is at your building is also serving a bigger catchment area. So maybe, I don't know if that means Briarcliff, it means Croton or whatever, but I would think that they need time to establish the relationships with those departments as well.
They do. So we cover Ossining, Briarcliff, Sleepy Hollow, Pleasantville, and Mount Pleasant. So we're sort of that from here to
Got it.
Mount Pleasant central area. Uh, I did reach out to the other chiefs in the area to make sure that they were aware of what's available to them.
Hmm.
I've encouraged the team to go out and meet with those chiefs because I think it really starts from the top and has to work down. Yesterday, we had some staff members from the Ossining School District in headquarters to sit down with the crisis team. That
Nice.
is a super important element of this.
Sure.
And the team was telling our district about how the school resource officer in Sleepy Hollow had taken them around to meet with every school counselor and principal in their middle high school. And so that's good news. That's what we want to hear. I check with the team pretty regularly on how often they're getting calls from the other jurisdictions.
Hmm.
And, they've let me know, like Mount Pleasant, they weren't hearing from quite as much, and now they're hearing from them more.
Got it.
My sense of things is that this may be a resource people don't fully understand. Each time one cop calls for the crisis team and they show up, you've won someone over. I've never seen
Exactly.
them show up on a call where that cop hasn't called back a second time. So it's going to be a slow burn for a little while.
Right.
But as they show up and they show their value, people are really saying, wow, this is a great thing. I've not heard a cop say anything other than this is really helpful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just kind of makes sense, and I think you've also talked about the fact that there are then some follow-on services that could be helpful. How does that work? Like, can they actually help people who, they determine that there are, some kind of that they're having a mental health crisis or that they have issues that they need to get help with? What's next? Like, what happens next from the crisis response team? How
So I
can they
think
help?
there were varying visions of what this was to become. There was the sort of theme of defunding police and replacing them with something different. I won't speak to that, but just conceptually,
Right.
the idea that the crisis team is here, some people may have believed that they were going to go independently on calls, and that is in fact happening.
Mm.
There are certain calls where it'll come into headquarters and they'll say, no, that's not really a cop thing, but crisis team, why don't you guys go out check that out, right? And sometimes cops will go on a call and we'll send them together. Other times we'll send just cops and they'll find out once they're there. But the real magic happens where, cops tend to go on a call. We're 24/7. So I'm here for 8 hours a day. That's only 1/3 of the hours that we're going to see in just this day. And when you figure out I'm only here for 40 hours a week, I'm only here for, less than a third of the week. There's a lot
Right.
of other hours that people need services. So with a crisis team that's able to, we can't always follow up. It's not always in the cards for people that work around the clock on a
Sure.
shift work schedule. The crisis team is able to go back to a home on something without police officers there and just say, hey, we're following up, we're checking in. But even better than that, right? That's government pushing in on somebody, and not everybody loves that idea. What I've seen that really proves that this is working is the folks that are coming to a police station and saying, hey, I had a call last week and the crisis team was here and I need their help and I lost their phone number or whatever the case is. Can I talk to them? And, this idea where people talked about cops being something that folks were afraid of or apprehensive to go to a police department because they're worried of the result. And now we're seeing people coming in here and saying, please help. And we're saying, hey, maybe it is a cop you need, but maybe it's not. Let me go get David from the team and he's going to come out and talk to you. And it's not just the mobile crisis response team. It's a familiar face. It's the same person that was at your house the last time, and they're
Mm.
friendly and it's that soft presentation that really allows people to sort of calm down and accept the help that they may need.
Yeah. I mean, it just sounds like really so amazing. It just couldn't be better. One of the other questions that we were talking about was, has it helped to avoid like unnecessary arrests, emergency room visits, things that might have otherwise happened if this team hadn't been there?
I think the as much as I say this is magic, and that I think this really is the best thing since sliced bread.
Hmm.
I think the reality is that we work in a business that has no real magic. This is magic in a sense that we're getting work done that we could never get done before, and we're helping people in ways that we weren't able to. The challenge for us is always going to be is that you can't fix someone's mental health issues in a single visit or sometimes in multiple visits. Sometimes people aren't even ready to accept help at all. This is magic in a sense that we're helping people where we had no resource to help them before, and to me, that is the most sincere form of service that we can provide, where someone is in crisis and may or may not know what they need or how badly they need it, but we're giving it to them in a way that maybe they can see this time. And if that gives them a sense of peace, then that is the greatest reward that we can possibly give. At the same time, I don't know we're necessarily reducing emergency room visits. I think, in fact, we may increase them on the short term
Hmm.
because more people are getting help and they're going somewhere. The first visit is not always the one that fixes the problem. Sometimes it takes multiples. But I think in terms of, uh, I think over the long term, your real ultimate benefit is you're going to see a reduction in the number of people entering the justice system.
Hmm.
I think that mostly what courts do is deal with things reactively. They're dealing with something after an incident's happened, where the crisis team is able to go and deal with the real underlying issue, and that's what our society needs, is to deal with the underlying issue.
Right. So you're
Really,
averting the incident kind of more
yeah,
than anything
well,
else, right?
as best as we
Potentially.
can, or we're dealing with it at its basic level when it's
Right.
happened.
Right.
At the end of the day, we're never going to eliminate all of these issues or even any of these issues. But what
Right.
we are do is we're going to address them more appropriately. And
Hmm.
I think that if we can give a little peace to a few families, then we are really moving forward our communities.
Yeah. And again, just, I mean, we talked a lot about just different mental health, but it also in terms of substance abuse
Oh yeah.
or are there shelters? You mentioned shelters a little bit. Like what other kinds of help is the mobile crisis unit actually able to offer?
Someday they're going to not be called the mobile crisis response team, because that is the thing we're most afraid of, is the crisis when
Right.
people are at that moment. But the reality is that they are our mobile community builders. So
Hmm.
they are dealing with everything from persons in crisis, domestic violence situations where people may need to be directed to resources that they either didn't know about or didn't have the strength to go to in that very moment. We're dealing with students in our school district, because our school district is fantastic, and I love our counselors and they do fantastic work. They really, I've never lived in a place or known a place that's cared about their scholars so much as our school district does. That said, they've got them for 6 hours a day. And
Hmm.
one of the challenges that I've always recognized in policing is that you can change all you want in 6 hours, but then they leave for 18 that they're on their own. And what this team does is they're able to partner with the schools in order to make sure their service is 24 hours a day. Or if there is an issue in the home, the school may not be able to get to there, but our team can.
Hmm.
So they're dealing with that. They're dealing with food insecurity, because ultimately, when you deal with any particular crime or any particular critical incident that we have, it typically isn't the thing you're looking at. Lots
Hmm.
of people have substance use disorder, but many of them are dealing with the underlying mental illness that comes with that. Lots of people are dealing with homelessness, but that could be caused by job insecurity. People are dealing with food insecurity, but that could be because of childcare issues. So, what the team does is they look at all of these issues
Right.
in order to really try and help people get stable. Stable
Yeah.
people are always going to do better, and so they're looking at all of the myriad issues that you could possibly have and trying
Yeah.
to find resources for everything.
I mean, it really is a holistic approach to policing, to mental health services, to actually getting help where it's needed, and in a home or wherever, whatever the situation is. Um, and how do people like find this help if they need it? It seems to me like, are they supposed to? They just call you 911, et cetera. Like, what happens? How do they make sure that they get the help that they need?
Some people do call me directly. That is probably not your best and most efficient method. The reality is this is not.
Okay, were you looking right at me when you said that?
No. But I
I'm
love that
joking.
we have those kind of partnerships where people know
Sure.
that this is where you go. I mean, to me, the
Yep.
greatest credit we can have is that folks call a police department and look for help. The
Sure.
reality is, this is not really a policing project. This is a
Hmm.
community project.
Right.
We happen to be the beneficiaries of it because we're 24/7, 365. So when Saturday night and Sunday night comes and you have an issue with your heat doesn't work, or a dog barking, or there's actual crime, or someone's having a mental health crisis, there's no one else to call but the police department because most people have gone home. So we house them, but the reality is this is just a community thing. So for right now, and for the foreseeable future, to get in touch with the crisis team, you would always call the police department, and you
Right.
do not have to be. I can't speak for how every department in Westchester County is doing this. I have lots of faith in all of them. My hope is that everybody treats it the same way. That you can call the police department and say, "Look, I have a family member who is going through this situation, and we really could use some help. Can we talk to the crisis team?" And you can speak to them more times than not. If they're in the building, we'll put you on the phone with them, but also that they can just come to your home. Um, and then beyond that, sometimes the desk officer really has to triage this and decide, do you need a police officer there? Should you have a police officer there? Sometimes the crisis team wants a cop there just in case.
Sure.
But what we've built culturally here is an understanding that it's not always an issue of policing. It may just be an issue of comfort. And let's get them in there and get everybody situated, and then really let them take over the call. So you're calling to us to get them, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you need a police response to your home.
Right. So, are you feeling good about your next step and that you're leaving the department in good hands? I know that there's an acting chief who's was appointed as you were exiting, and just sort of saying your goodbyes. And I know that he's been there for quite some time, and I would guess that he's very also very committed to utilizing the MCRT. But what do you think? Do you have any words of wisdom to impart to the acting chief, Brendan Donahue, or anything else that you can think about?
Yeah, look, the village is in good hands for generations to come. The folks that come behind me, have a variety of perspectives. But so the next chief that's coming along, at least in an acting capacity, he's been my captain for a number of years now, and a lieutenant here and a sergeant here, and we were police officers together. I think every chief comes in with their own philosophy because we all have different experiences, and I think that whoever sits in this particular chair gains a lot as the longer they sit here, because they'll have the team comes up here and says, we're going to come have coffee and talk about what's going on, or I go down and hang out with them. And I think that really builds on the relationship. But ultimately, I think that what we're looking at here is a situation where you've got a choice on the next chief between good and great. And the generations after them are even more special, because what you see in our sergeants and our police officers coming up is people that began here knowing policing as something that had a crisis team in it, that this was our priority. They never knew policing before we had these things. So I love that I've seen this go from my first police car had nothing but a radio and a shotgun in it, to a car now that has cameras in every single direction and all these
Yeah.
tools and computers and all sorts of stuff all over the place. And people are stacked with equipment and crisis teams. And, ultimately the big sell on this crisis team is that you can tell cops this takes work off your plate. You
Right.
look at it and go, hey, if
Right.
you didn't want to go deal with that situation, there's your resource that can take this from you. And nobody loves to hear anything more than you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that I think we're good for generations to come. My hope is just that as we hire new police officers, that we're able to find people that really are truly committed and love our community as much as I've loved this community. I still live here. My kids still go to school here. And so that's my statement to the trust level of the people coming behind me, that I trust them with my life, with my children's life, with my family's lives, and that I think they're going to get this right.
Fantastic. And I'm so grateful again to you for all of the positivity that you brought to this position, and building relationships. It's really been sort of the backbone, in my opinion, about, what you felt was so important, whether it was in the schools or with this crisis team or with your department. But again, grateful for all of the great work that you've done in bringing this again to Ossining. I think has been something very fantastic. And I hope that lots of other communities get get to benefit from it as well. And I thank you again so much for your service to Ossining, and I know that we're going to see you again just around the corner. Thanks. And that's all for this episode of Building Healthy Communities. So until next time, I hope everybody is safe and healthy.